Hello and welcome to Wednesday Warfare, where I review NXT and AEW Dynamite back-to-back and try and figure out which show won for the week. And as always, like what you like, don't be a dick. Let's begin. NXT this week opens up with a non-title match as Lorcan and Birch take on Tommaso Ciampa and Timothy Thatcher. Bit of intrigue before we even get the match beginning, before they even make their way through the curtain, because you see Thatcher having a chat with Marcel Bartel of Imperium before he meets up with Ciampa. Ooh, bit of intrigue because those two were teammates with Walter in Ring Conf in WXW before that, which is, there's overlap between Ring Conf and Imperium. So, what's going on there? So anyway, the match happens, and it's four guys with very similar smash mouth, hard-hitting styles going at it here. So if you like that kind of style, it's very enjoyable. Scary bump by Thatcher before the break where he takes a big one on his shoulder and they come back from break and he seems to be fine, I guess. Before Thatcher can make a tag, he sees Imperium standing on the stage and that distracts him. That allows the champions to win the match with their double team move on Thatcher. And I immediately begin to wonder, and we see more of this kind of seed planting later in the show where Thatcher acknowledges there's a history between he and Bartel and he and Imperium, and Ciampa wants to try and nip that in the bud. But I'm wondering where this is going to go, because there is that history there. Could we be seeing, Thatcher maybe being recruited to Imperium, or maybe even kind of like a temporary leader for Imperium in Walter's absence? You never know, but I feel that's where this is headed. One variant of that theory. Roderick Strong in the ring calling out Adam Cole, but the champion, Finn Balor, shows up instead. Roderick blames Finn for breaking up the Undisputed Era, but Balor says it's the championship, that not himself, that caused the group to fall apart. He answers Adam Cole's challenge for a title match and says next week it's happening, and there you go. He basically browbeats Roderick then, saying you're never going to be a leader, you're always going to be a follower. That causes Roderick to strike first. They have a bit of a scuffle. We find out they will be having a match later tonight in the main event. So no answers from Cole yet. It's interesting to see that Finn just gives him the title match. I guess he's got the spunk and the fire. Ooh, you've turned on your friends. That makes you championship caliber material. So, heel versus tweener. At the very least, it's Cole versus Balor, kind of a tweener role. We'll see how that goes. In the spirit of a Gargano family Christmas, this week's multi-part series with The Way involves all four of them going to therapy because Austin Theory is still in denial over what happened to him when Dexter Lumis abducted him several weeks ago, while Indy Hartwell still with a schoolgirl crush on Lumis, writing Mrs. Indie Wrestling Lumis on a notepad, and like every other line is her saying, I'd like to do this suggestive thing with him, like to counter whatever someone else is saying. And Johnny's getting mad at the therapist and saying, I'm not going to let you therapy on him or her or me. And so the doctor kicks Johnny out in the first segment, and in the second segment we see Johnny's like trying to text Candice LeRae messages and she's relaying the info. Then everyone gets kicked out but Austin Theory. And then finally in the third segment, the finale, the therapist tries to get the scoop on what really happened with Theory and Lumis. And so Theory says, I was just boarded up in a room eating cereal all for 3 days. It was great. He's a nice guy. And then the doctor says, I spoke with Dexter Lumis before talking to you, which is weird because, Austin's like, he never speaks. But she says, Lumis said you were this terrible person to be with, like you were so obnoxious and you had poor hygiene and this and that. And it's really just dogging him. And that causes Theory to melt down and cry. And Gargano acts like he's going to give the therapist a piece of his mind. But it sounds like it was all set up. It was a setup all along, son of a bitch, by Johnny Gargano. And he pays her extra for having, I guess, lied about Dexter Lumis. That seems very unethical, but like this closing line by the therapist going, what a bunch of idiots, just to really put the stamp on it. It wasn't the same kind of like merriment and joy I felt from the Christmas skits from a couple of months ago, but this one still was pretty high up there. Backstage, Cameron Grimes is confronted by William Regal about his assault on a crew member last week, the whole basketball thing. Says there's a potential lawsuit on the horizon from that. Cameron is thinking bribe, but Regal says not so fast. You have a match tonight with Bronson Reed. Next, we see ALIYAH versus Ember Moon in singles action, and early on, Ember baits ALIYAH to hit her, and of course it goes terribly for ALIYAH. The Robert Stone brand, Stone and Jessica Mea are all over this thing, trying to distract Ember. But Shotzi Blackheart, who accompanied Ember to the ring with her tank, makes the save and takes them out. That allows Ember to hit the Eclipse to win. It's a pretty good match here, good little match. In the biggest, or at the very least, the most hyped up match on NXT this week, you got the Women's Tag Team Championships as Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler defend against Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez. Nice little callback earlier in the match between Shayna and Dakota, playing up on their past history and how Shayna used to brutalize Dakota back in the days before Dakota became a heel and got really vicious. Nia just ragdolling Dakota occasionally, which makes for great TV, I think. Raquel with a hot tag, hurling Shayna around. We get a bit of a face-off with her and Nia, but it doesn't really go anywhere. We get a ref bump in this match, and I'm pretty sure this is one of the first, if not the first, lady ref bumps we've seen at NXT/WWE since they've been having lady refs back in the fold in the company. I could be wrong on that one, but it feels very fresh and new to see that happening right now. So anyway, Kirifuda clutch is locked in on Dakota, who is not a legal woman, by the way. She's not legal here, but Adam Pearce sending in a new official who's from Raw, they point out on commentary, and he calls the match, and the champions retain. So a bit of controversy here in this, bit of a screwy finish, which they don't really do. I feel they don't do it that much in NXT to have these really screwy finishes that somehow protect both sides. Like, this is about as well of as good of a heel versus heel match as you're going to see, where at least you're still kind of rooting for one heel team, Raquel and Dakota, to actually win. There were some good close calls in this one. The finish does protect both sides in a way. Like, Nia and Shayna, it's going to help them because they're already definitely more heelish, I'd say. I think like Raquel and Dakota have more of that kind of groundswell of support just from tenure and just being having great chemistry and being a great team. So where it's going to go, they said later on, we saw an argument with Regal and Pearce behind closed doors. Then Regal says later on, next week there's going to be an announcement that will change the landscape of NXT based on what we saw in this tag championship match. What that could mean, I mean, who knows? There's a lot of things tonight between this show and AEW where there's a lot to speculate on, and I'm like, I'm not even going to bother trying. We get a vignette from Isaiah Swerve Scott where he says he doesn't understand how guys like Leon Ruff can just walk in and get a title shot right out the gate, whereas he has scratched and clawed his way through everything and has gotten nothing in return. He tells Leon not to go to war with a man who cares less than you do, and how dangerous he is now because he just doesn't care anymore. I dig it. I kind of like that perspective on things with the darker side or the edgier side of a wrestler. LA Knight makes his appearance at the Performance Center, the former Eli Drake, with a promo saying that Tom Brady wishes that he were half the man that LA Knight is, but that, like Tom Brady, he wasn't the first draft pick, but he's going to be the one who gets all the records. And he's not a flippy guy, he's not a divey guy, but he gets the job done. When he's done with his promo, Bronson Reed comes out for his match. They share a look, planting seeds. And then we have our match with Reed versus Cameron Grimes. Grimes wants to bribe his way out of the match, but Reed's having none of it. Grimes tries to up and leave the match at one point, but Bronson just dives onto him. At the end, LA Knight comes back though, because Cameron Grimes' hat has been, flopped around, and he throws the hat back in the ring, and that distracts Reed, allows Cameron to hit the cave-in to win his match. So based on what we see here, LA Knight has seemed to have found his first rival in NXT in Bronson Reed. Not the way I would have expected it to go, because I like the momentum that Bronson Reed has had, but I think he will be a good first opponent for LA Knight here. And yeah, we'll see where LA's trajectory goes. Caden Carter backstage talking about Kacy Catanzaro's leg injury at the hands of Xia Li. She's mad at Xia now, wants to take her frustrations out on her. They have a match next week. We get a recap of the Karrion Kross Santos Escobar match from last week, and then after the finale of the therapy stuff with The Way, we see Everrise getting ready for a match with Breezango, who we've not seen on TV in a while, and they might as well not have taken off their astronaut helmets. It could have been literally anybody, because they get jumped mid-entrance, do Tyler and Fandango, by Wild and Mendoza of Legado del Fantasma, and then Santos Escobar shows up. Everrise trying to escape, but Santos pretty much single-handedly beats them both up. And he gets on the microphone and says, anyone who takes what happened last week as a sign of weakness, well, you're going to suffer the same fate that these goofy bastards just did. I don't know, the fan in me wanted to see Everrise versus Breezango in a fun match, but we didn't get that, so boo heels. In your main event, non-title match as Finn Balor takes on Roderick Strong, who is free of UE branding and music. He's his own man once again, it seems to be. This match very much in the style of Balor O'Reilly or Balor Dunn. Just, lots of good technical work, good graps, good strikes. These two, just on paper, it's going to be a big old knocky-draggy technical match. It's a very competitive bout here, but it ends very much undramatically, just very open and shut, where Finn hits the drop kick, the coup de grace, the 1916, to win pretty handily, never really in doubt. But then after the match, we see Adam Cole standing on the stage, and he does the thumb to self, and Finn does the points, and that's where we end off on the little preview of the NXT Championship match next week. So yeah, I thought this is a good, fine main event. Just kind of showing, hey, Finn and Adam, they're a bit of rivals, and so we'll see what happens. Well, this week AEW Dynamite will see you at the crossroads so you won't be lonely, and after what feels like an eternity of build, we're finally going to get this mixed tag match to open the show as Cody Rhodes and Red Velvet take on Shaquille O'Neal. Yes, that's Shaquille O'Neal, not the other one you're thinking of, and Jade Cargill. Shaq looking impressive against Cody, kind of like deflecting a lot of his early attacks, strong and unaffected, and Jade showing off her power and agility here against the smaller Red Velvet. Shaq gets bumped to the outside, and Austin Gunn from the other side of the barricade hits him with a chair, and Shaq just takes out a bunch of members of the Nightmare family and whatnot. Red Velvet with a big old moonsault to the outside onto some other people. At one point in the match, Shaq hits a big old powerbomb onto Cody, but not before doing a Brody Lee tribute beforehand, which was totally unexpected. The ladies setting up Chekhov's tables on the outside, and a couple of minutes later, Shaq almost kind of jumps his cue going to the middle of the apron, but he goes back to the corner, comes back to the apron, and then Cody clearing the top rope, diving onto Shaq, and they both crash through the tables, which is pretty wild. Ultimately, Jade hits the Glam Slam on Red Velvet to win the match. So there you go. I think this match was good for what it was. It was not amazing, but it's a whole lot better than I think a lot of people expected it was going to be. I think Shaq did fairly well for himself here. He didn't have to do too much. We finally get Shaq in an actual match where he does stuff. What was the closest we got to that? Was the Andre the Giant Battle Royal at Mania 32 when he did some choking spots. They got their big pop culture moment, their Sports Center moment as it's called, the big dive through the table. It was what it was, and hopefully all the parties are happy with it, because I heard that Shaq was filming for his reality show there, and of course AEW getting the exposure, being with Shaq and stuff. It seems like it's win-win. But then afterwards, we see Shaq being loaded into an ambulance because he was presumably knocked out from the table spot. Shivani wants to go check on him. He opens the door and suddenly Shaq's not there anymore. Oh my God, Shaquille O'Neal is the Fiend, everyone! Pac and Ray Phoenix destroy John Skyler and D3 in a squash match here. I mean, John Skyler takes all the offense. I don't even think I saw D3 get in the ring. Barely even heard his name in the match for that matter. 2/3 Death Triangle win this one pretty handily, and it almost makes you wonder why this match was even on the card. It's time for the MJF and Chris Jericho press conference. Things get off to a great start when we can't hear the first question on the house mic. Jericho says it's been a year since he lost the AEW championship, and now he wants more gold to kind of make up for that. Conrad Thompson is the next person to ask a question. He asks when Sammy Guevara can come back to the group, and both Jericho and Max just kind of just yell at him and shoot him away. A guy from Barstool Sports asks why they attacked Papa Buck last week, and MJF calls it self-defense from the light shove Papa Buck did to Jericho the week before that. And then last but not least, it's Eric Bischoff. Looks like except for Bruce Pritchard, the Conradiverse is in full strength here in Jacksonville. Bischoff asking Jericho where he would rank attacking Papa Buck on the list of stupidest things he's ever done. Jericho starts to answer, but then the Young Bucks interrupt. Big old dad promo by the Bucks here, where they put over how great of a dad that he's been to them, and how obviously Jericho and MJF didn't have as good of father figures. Matt says if there were no Papa Buck, there'd likely be no AEW, which means MJF would still be waiting for a phone call from Rosie O'Donnell for a callback, and Jericho might be curtain jerking at the Performance Center, which, come on guys, enough's enough. A double super kick by the Bucks, and a big old fight breaks out. The Good Brothers show up, and they help produce some tables. We get some double dives by Nick and Matt onto Santana and Ortiz to close out the segment here. That was a fun segment, a bit derivative of the debate we saw with Jericho and Orange Cassidy last year. It's still good to see the Bucks with some fire, getting some nice momentum going into the tag title match here. The one thing I didn't like about it was just when Matt did the whole thing at the Performance Center. Come on, can y'all go 1 week, just 1 week, without referencing the other guys? We get a hype video on the exploding barbed wire death match with Moxley and Omega, complete with sound bites from Onita, who knows a thing or two about that kind of match. That was pretty cool surprise to see him there. And from one legend to another, we see the return of Tully Blanchard in a nationally televised match for the first time in over 30 years, as he and FTR take on the Jurassic Express. And what a cool moment here to see Tully coming out with the old NWA US Championship, FTR with the old NWA World Tag Belts, and J.J. Dillon is with them in the manager position. A little bit of a kind of a blending of the old and the new with the Horsemen and the guys who are inspired by the Horsemen. Really cool moment here. Tully gets some licks in, mostly working Marco Stunt in this match. He's the one guy he really targets here. At one point, he hits his trademark slingshot suplex on him, which gets a really big pop. Near the end, Jungle Boy wants to go for a dive, but he's intercepted by somebody in a mask, kind of dressed like a crew member. We have 3-man spike pile driver to allow Tully and FTR to win the match, and then the masked man comes in and joins them to celebrate, and it's Shawn Spears, who we've not seen in quite a while in AEW. He seemed to leave in a huff, and he's back here, back with his old manager and Tully Blanchard, and as he and they and FTR are all celebrating with J.J. Dillon, suddenly Arn Anderson pops up and he goes, and then he leaves. So we're planting seeds for something going on with them. But yeah, this match, like the mixed tag match earlier, was not like a Matt classic, not a 5-star classic match, but it was still a good match with a lot of fun moments, especially seeing Tully getting back in there. You know, definite feels in the air with Tully coming back and JJ there. It was just a really cool moment to see Tully get that kind of moment in the spotlight. Then after the match, Shivani's on stage. He busts JJ Dillon's balls on his way to the back, and then he brings out his new broadcast partner for Dark Elevation, Paul White, the former Big Show, making his live debut for AEW, wearing his new No More BS shirt. Get it? BS stands for Big Show. Like, God, the rich tradition of shitty merchandise for Paul White continues to this very day. The guy can't catch a break. So anyway, Paul talks about the Dark Elevation show, how happy he is to be in AEW, how he started his career on TNT, and now he's back in TNT. And then he drops this bombshell. He says there's going to be a big announcement, a big reveal at Revolution, or he called it Evolution, but there will be a new signee to AEW who's going to be a huge asset to the company. He says, a Hall of Fame worthy talent. Well, that certainly leaves it wide open. There's so much speculation of that. I'm not even going to begin to try and guess, but Hall of Fame worthy implies to me somebody who is a legend or someone in that kind of that status, but isn't in any kind of Hall of Fame yet. So who is it that's unsigned right now who could be a Hall of Famer, couldn't, maybe he is a Hall of Famer, we don't know. But I think it's like, who could be an asset to AEW, who would be a big get, like who could be the next one, like would it top Paul White? I mean, again, Paul White as a performer, his best days are over, but still a big name in the world of wrestling. So for AEW, get him, like I said last week, I think is good for AEW. So who could they get that would kind of like ride that momentum and possibly improve or possibly top what they did with Paul White? Place your bets in the comment section. In the finals of the Women's Eliminator Tournament, you got Nyla Rose from the US bracket taking on Ryo Mizunami of the Japan bracket, and the winner faces Hikaru Shida for the Women's Championship at Revolution. Rose is back with Vicky Guerrero this week, so that answers my question from before about what their status together is. Ryo has quite the shtick in this matchup here, and this match really goes all over the place in terms of mood as it goes on. It goes from lighthearted stuff with Ryo early on, and there's big old attacks, great back and forth, it's very physical. By the end, Mizunami beats Rose with a spear and a guillotine leg drop, and she's going to the pay-per-view to face off with Shida. They face off, the challenger and champion. They shake hands, they start trading forearms for shits and giggles, and Shida wins that exchange, and the happiness, they're friends, I guess. So yeah, their match should be a good one. I'm looking forward to that. It's time for a Sting interview once again. Sting wants to thank Brian Cage for powerbombing him 2 weeks ago because it shook the ring rust off him, and now he's ready for a street fight. Then Ricky Starks shows up and he puts Sting over and says, you know, for what happened last week, you still got it, but you're no icon. He slaps Sting, but Sting beats him up, hits him with the splash and the Scorpion Deathlock. And then the rest of Team Taz come in. Powerhouse Hobbs and Hook break up the hold. Cage wants to powerbomb Sting again, but Darby Allin comes in and makes the save. And so then they chase Cage and Team Taz off, and they stand tall. You know what? I think that last week they peaked in the build. You couldn't have gotten higher than Darby Allin ziplining down with a skateboard. Face of the Revolution qualifying match next as 10 of the Dark Order takes on Max Caster of the Acclaimed. Scorpio Sky on commentary for this one spends the entire time putting himself over and saying he's going to win the ladder match, and JR is getting increasingly ornery over Max Caster and his unwillingness to capitalize on attacks. It's a good match, some young guns you don't normally see in kind of a singles capacity in Dynamite. In the end though, Jack Evans decks 10 with a boombox, and I immediately go back to when the Headbangers beat up like Road Dogg with a boombox, and JR with his call, I know that wasn't a JVC kaboombox because those sure don't break, but he didn't get to drop that line in this one. So that allows Caster to win. He is going into the ladder match on Sunday. Sixth man of that match still to be revealed. And then the best part at the end though, Jack Evans makes his way to the stage, and Big Money Matt Hardy is there and hands him a big old envelope saying, Jack Evans, $4,200, big neon envelope too. too, so it can be seen from space. And I was like, you might as well just give him a big burlap sack with a $sign on it, because it would have been just as effective. We hear from Miro to get his thoughts on the tag team match on Sunday, where he says he's going to give the people what they want, destruction. Then we go to our main event as Big Money Matt Hardy and Mark Quinn take on Hangman Page and John Silver. Certainly a curious main event, kind of a rare sight to see any of these guys in a main event slot on Dynamite as of late. Pretty good match still though. Hardy, the story with him, he occasionally throws Mark Quinn, kind of throws him under the bus and lets him get beat up for a bit. That's kind of the recurring thing with this matchup. Quinn's selling his ass off for Silver and Page. Early on, he takes a back body drop, which is a full flip and lands on his face, which is really impressive. He takes a big German into a buckshot lariat, and then Page staring a hole through Hardy as he covers him to win the match, but then Matt jumps in, beats him up with a microphone, hit him repeatedly with it. The rest of the Dark Order come out and beat up Hardy for a bit. Then a bunch of other wrestlers who are going to be in the tag team battle royal come out, and they all fight, and then another wave. So this big old they has fight, Donnybrook, to close out the show, and Matt Hardy gives -1 some lip as he goes off, and that's how the show ends. I thought that was, it's one of AEW's things, which is something I've always liked, but they kind of go to the well a bit too often with this, where it's like the big giant brawl to end. Like, I think it's a good thing to end a go-home show to a pay-per-view on. Big roster brawls can be fun when done sparingly, and I think they've kind of cooled off a little bit on it. So yeah, I think that the match itself was fine. Very curious that this was the main event match, is all I'm saying. Time now for me to decide which show won for the week, NXT or AEW Dynamite, and this week my choice is AEW. I think this week NXT had a good chance to offer up some good counter programming to what AEW had been hyping up for weeks here, and they had a couple of good matches on the show, and one good recurring bit with the Way, but besides that, I don't think they didn't accomplish that, in my opinion. I think there was just way too much stuff going on with Dynamite this week for it to be really denied. I think there was a lot of good build for Revolution just as a baseline, but also I like the blend of what we saw on this show, because we saw guys like Tully Blanchard and Onita and Paul White and Shaquille O'Neal getting good looks here. Shaq, I think, was pretty impressive in this matchup here. He did exactly, I think, what he needed to do. It was, again, a match that was better than it had any right to be. Could have been a whole lot worse. I think they really delivered here. And a couple of higher card matches with guys who don't really usually fit in that slot. Guys like Ten and Max Caster and Mark Quinn and John Silver, these guys who don't usually populate the main event scene. And here they are in like the semi-main and the main event matches. Pretty cool to see them in those capacities. And so yeah, I think overall Dynamite was a much more entertaining show, more bang for your buck, no pun intended, compared to NXT. But what did you think of the Wednesday shows this week? Let me know in the comment section below, and stay tuned for later this week when Jay Biggs and I give you our predictions for the Revolution pay-per-view. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.